You're listening to Skate of Thrones, your go-to podcast for dialed-in LA Kings coverage.
Welcome back to Skate of Thrones. I'm your host, Casey Kasliner, here at Crypto.com Arena as the LA Kings drop a shootout to Detroit. Final score 4-3 in favor of the Red Wings, a team that's been very solid out the gate. And the Kings still winless at home through 4 games played. They have 2 total points at home, so they get a point. That's the silver lining tonight. But the Kings coming off a solid road trip, 5-0-1 on that most recent trip to get right back in the thick of the Pacific standings here early in the season, lose another one at home. And for the Kings, this was their 3rd shootout of the season, 7th overall overtime game through 12 games played. Pretty remarkable how much extra hockey they've played to start this season, and it's been very unusual. But the Kings had to roll with an interesting lineup, 11 forwards, 7 defensemen, as Trevor Moore, the third-line winger, sat out the game with personal reasons, personal concerns, sidelined him. So he did not play. And on that third line, the Kings had a much different look. Laferriere, Deneau, and Armia. So, of course, not having Trevor Moore and Warren Foegele injured right now for the foreseeable future. That third line, a bit different, but a solid line tonight. I think that line has been one of my favorites these past few years, no matter how it's looked, especially with Deneau in the middle. And Deneau's another guy who was talked about coming into this matchup because he basically sat out the entire third period against San Jose. So that was another player that we kind of had our eyes on. But Phillip Deneau ended up playing 16 minutes, so not out of the ordinary for him. Got some time on the power play as well. But the Kings are just a weird team this year. They really struggle on the power play, but in this game they score 2 6-on-5 goals to force overtime. And who would have thought that Corey Perry, of all people, would be co-leading the LA Kings in goals scored so far? He had 2 this game, brings him to 5 overall, tied with Kevin Fiala and Adrian Kempe. And he's played half the games that those other 2 have played. So Corey Perry has been incredible revelation for the Kings on that fourth line. And tonight he actually got put on the second line because of the changes, not having Trevor Moore. And we'll probably see, if those lines change with no Warren Foegele. But the first line was typical. The second line, Byfield, of course, the center. Fiala on the left wing, Perry on the right side. I already mentioned that third line. And then Malott and Turcotte on the bottom. And so we saw some flow with Jim Hiller not being, shy from placing guys with maybe guys they don't necessarily skate with all the time. And then the 7th defenseman was Jacob Muvarari, who I think has been a very solid player for the Kings in his tenure. This was his season debut for LA, technically. So, yeah, this game, definitely was a weird one for the Kings because it started very back and forth. Detroit and LA each had chances, and the Kings, a lot of their chances came off breakaways. Byfield had one, Kempe had one, and credit to Cam Talbot, the former King, suiting up tonight for Detroit. He was very good in net, 36 of 39, played through overtime, and the Kings, like I mentioned, we'll get to it more in a moment, thought they won this game in overtime, but the goal was called back, and Detroit nearly had a goal called back, and their player of the game, offensively at least, was Marco Kasper, had 2 goals, and the question on his first goal was if he had the high touch on the puck, and they determined he didn't, and a lot of people disagreed with that. But at the end of the day, the Kings' PK struggled, giving up 2 power play goals in the second period. There were no goals in the first period. The Kings actually got the breakthrough in the second period as Alex Laferriere connected so well after the Kings gave up a penalty to Detroit. It was a shorthanded situation for Laferriere, who read the puck perfectly after a really good play by Quentin Byfield and Cody Ceci on the near half wall, kind of around the circle, to win the puck and then get it to Laferriere, who faked out Finney and then took it the distance. But then they gave up 2 power play goals in that period, just about 2 minutes apart. DeBrincat and Kasper. That was 1 of 2 for Kasper. Kasper scored in the third period, and it looked pretty bleak for LA because the Wings extended their lead with less than half of the third period left. The Kings pull the goalie, Darcy Kemper, and Corey Perry gets credit for both goals. Thought the second one was Byfield at first, but Corey Perry gets his 4th and 5th goals of the season. I mean, he's a guy that at the net front has just been so good. You can really credit that to his experience. He's a guy that the Kings needed. Coming back from injury, they've been so much better with him in the lineup. You can tell. And they've struggled to kind of field a consistent fourth line. Saw that last year. This year it's looked a lot better. I really like Jeff Malott and his intensity. If he can keep the penalty minutes down a little bit, he'll be a really solid player. We know Alex Turcotte, he had a really dangerously good game, dangerous for the opponent, of course. And then, I know Perry wasn't on the fourth line tonight, but he's a guy that usually skates with them. And Brant Clark, another guy that, definitely should talk about, because he did not see that much playing time against San Jose. He was the only defenseman for the LA Kings in that game to play under 20 minutes. And against the Red Wings, definitely a game where he showed himself very well. And we talked about Jim Hiller this past week, and how, he kind of mentioned, that things would change with Clark going forward. He ends up playing over 20 minutes, more than Mikey Anderson, more than Cody Ceci. He had the second most shifts on the team, only shy of Drew Doughty's 27. He also played 27 minutes. So, yeah, I think Brant Clark, he was -1 in this game, but he generated 4 shots. He was really close to having a goal on a couple different occasions. He, of course, is a guy who can free up the puck, dish in passes through traffic from the point. He's a guy that should continue to get 20 minutes, and a guy that, the Kings, defensive front is pretty healthy at this point. The forwards have been the more, area for concern, and the Kings also had 7 defensemen in this game. So, it was probably going to be a more defensively minded game, but if the Kings don't give up those penalties, it may be a different feat for them. They probably win in regulation. I mean, you never know, but they did give up a couple of power play goals that were pretty detrimental. And we all know what happened in overtime. Kevin Fiala appears to have the game winner, and what was an electric goal for him. But upon further review, it was determined that he interfered with Cam Talbot in the net front in the crease, and so that goal was taken off. And then the Kings lost the shootout. And I will say, I felt like the shootout was a little strange because, they put in Corey Perry. I don't know if I would have chosen him in a shootout to get the job done. And Cam Talbot got his job done. He shed the angle, and Perry's shot was pretty uncompetitive. I know other guys missed as well, but Lucas Raymond, was the guy to ultimately win it when it was all said and done for Detroit in that shootout. But what a game from Marco Kasper as well. But for the Kings, there's still a lot of issues that are coming very clear. It's just a lot of contradictions on this team. They're 21st in penalty kill, but first in shorthanded goals. Had another one tonight. Of course, haven't won at home after having such a great home record last year. Like, there's a lot of things that just contradict each other that, either last year made sense and now don't. And they have not lost a game yet with Corey Perry in the lineup. He's played 6 games with LA, and they've had 4 wins with him. And he's just been, it's very it's not shocking, but it's just such a interesting dynamic. A guy that, didn't necessarily seem like he would have this quick of an impact right away. For what it's worth, he led the Kings in XG as well. That's probably obvious. But, the Kings, they fought. This is a game that they're disappointed they lost, but they're happy to get a point in a game that really looked bleak in those final minutes of regulation. And I think it's good to know that they can score on the 6-on-5 like that, but the power play still has to be better. They had a few uninspired power plays this game. So, yeah, it's just a weird situation right now if you're the Kings, because they're playing in a strange way, but it feels like the roster construction is also strange in how it's operated, with these guys and just, playing time and everything else. And, of course, navigating injuries is hard as well, and a guy like Trevor Moore not playing, that's going to jumble your third line a bit. But I thought, we saw some good stuff from the first line. Kempe was so dangerous, as he always is, creating opportunities. I thought, Kuzmenko also showed some flashes of kind of filling in that Trevor Moore role quite a bit in this game. Darcy Kemper was incredible in this game also. I mean, if that wasn't already obvious, he, saved 24 of 27, which, isn't ideal to give up 3 goals, but, those 3 goals allowed were not bad goals to give up. 2 on the power play, and then the second Kasper goal was just great passing by Detroit. The Kings had a bit of a meltdown on defense. So it's a strange game, probably the weirdest game the Kings have played in this year. But when it's all said and done, they get a point, and I think that's all you can really ask for. They're fighting late in games, in a team like this that just isn't necessarily built the same way as some of these other teams. And I think Detroit's a hard team to measure because They've had a hot start to the year, but we haven't, seen a whole lot from them to prove themselves these past few years. They're still building their way up. So, yeah, it's interesting. And I think, it's solid for the Kings. They're going to play one of the better teams in the league, the New Jersey Devils, who are coming off a loss to the Sharks. So that'll be an interesting one on Saturday. But, yeah, I mean, Corey Perry talked about it in the postgame on kind of, the Kings' inability to play a full 60 minutes, at least in regulation. He said, when they're able to do it, they look really good doing it. The optics are good, but they have to stick with it. And so they have to sort of stay consistent in that way and not let things fall by the wayside. And Jim Hiller talked about Corey Perry's impact as well. I think he's a guy that, really for the Kings will be the X factor on whether they can make some noise. He's not a guy they're going to rely on maybe to have this same production all year, but a hot start like this to sort of add some energy and really allow the defenseman to have confidence in dumping the puck in from the point, I think is huge. And so, yeah, I mean, and I didn't even know initially that Perry had that game-tying goal. I thought it was Byfield, but Perry did get a stick on it. So he's just in the right place at the right time. You can't ask for much more. And yeah, I mean, we've seen that from the Kings a little bit. They brought in Kuzmenko, a guy that they didn't really know what their expectations would be of him, and he ends up being a revelation. Same could happen for Perry. I know they're different types of players. We've seen some of that from Armia as well. They've had some success with some of these wingers. They're not, the top tier wingers in the league necessarily by name, but they're guys that get the job done. They do the dirty work. Speaking of wingers, the Adrian Kempe contract talks definitely heating up. I mean, if you didn't see, Martin H signs an extension, technically a center, but Cooley signs an extension as well. And so, these forwards are getting paid, and the Kings are kind of on the clock with that. We know they have some free agents heading into next year that they really need to take care of. Brant Clark's one of them as well, Andrei Kuzmenko. So that's sort of in the back of everyone's mind. I don't imagine that it's taking a huge toll on the ice, but maybe it is. You never know. I mean, the instability of a team can certainly add fatigue and sort of mental stress to these players. So that's just one thing to think about. Maybe not a huge, issue that needs to be done today, but maybe an existential thing that's coming up that if you're the Kings, you have to address at some point. So yeah, 4-3 final in favor of Detroit. The Kings still winless at home, 0-2-2. They'll welcome the Red Wings next, as the Kings are desperately trying to get that first home win of the year. They've been great on the road so far, coming off a solid road trip where they, like I said, went 5-0-1, only missing out on one possible point. And, they lost a game against Nashville. They played well in. So yeah, they'll play New Jersey, Winnipeg, and Florida to finish out the homestand. We'll have action live from Crypto.com Arena when those games take place. But once again, I'm Casey Kasliner here on Skate of Thrones. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.